One thing that we all know about food is everybody everywhere gathers around food. No matter what culture you're from, no matter what country you're from, food is the great uniter. We all eat, right? What does rice mean to you? When you think about rice, what does it mean to you? And I'll start.
Having no rice at a party is like having a wedding without a wedding cake. That's how important rice is. That's how much people love rice. And just like everyone else, my family, we ate rice every single day. But the goal—
I had rice yesterday.
I'm a daily rice eater as well. I mean, I'm part of that support group where we eat rice daily and cook rice daily.
If you're from whichever country you're from, that food to you is your cuisine. So we have leveled everything now where all foods are cuisine because it's what is important to us and what's important to me. So I love the rice bowl concept.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thanks for saying that.
That's awesome.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. So this is FLIK's Entrepreneurial Council. We're all here to talk to you today about Black History Month, which is an exciting opportunity for us. So this is the section where we're going to talk a little bit about Black chefs' contributions to the culinary traditions in the United States. And we're going to hear mostly from Erica, Mike, and Chef Randall on this one. So Mike, I'll let you take it away. Welcome, Chef.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
Hey, Chef, how are you?
Chef.
Hi, Chef.
Hello, everyone. How's everybody? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy to see you.
We're so happy to meet you.
I want to start off by, I definitely want to introduce my friend, my mentor, Chef Joe Randall. But I want to talk quickly about the goal of this whole, the whole Black History Month piece that we're doing for FLIK and doing for the company this year. The goal for me, as I always said, is just not about food. It's about, the goal is to be informative, giving information to the whole company about Black history, Black pride, and the achievements that we made. Food, absolutely. We do a food component in there. But I also want to bring forth, why is it important for us to remember legends? So, and I'm getting emotional, but I want to introduce Joe. I met Joe, Chef Joe, and I don't know if you remember this, Chef, 1992 at the first symposium dedicated to preserving old Southern recipes with Edna Lewis and Scott Peacock at the Middleton in Charleston,
Middleton Place. Yeah,
Middleton Place, you remember, right?
Was it 92 or 90?
Oh God, now you really want me to take me back 2 more years.
Yeah, no, it was at Middleton Place.
Chef, I'm trying to add 2 more years on to my life. I'm not trying to take it away. Yeah, you know what? I thought it was, I struggled with it last night. I was like, and I kept trying to find, of course, information. I said, oh, okay, it might have been 92. But 91 or 90, you're right. You're right.
Anyway, but it was Edna Lewis. Edna was there. They had most of the Southern dignitaries and people who were knowledgeable about Southern food were there.
3 days.
The intention was to bring together those people. It was hosted by the organization that Scott and Edna were developing, which eventually evolved into the Southern Food Alliance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll never forget. So I met you because I said we were there for 3 days, and I made sure I sat at your table every day. And one of the things that you said, and I have a book of quotes that I have a lot in there, and I went to my book of quotes last night and I looked up where was the quote that I got from Chef Joe Randall. And the one quote that you said, and I want us to talk a little bit about this, and because the second part of the series is called Everybody Cooks. And this is a feature honoring all of our Black chefs that sometimes are undervalued, and we want to make sure that we give homage to them. But one of the things you said Black chefs have been the backbone of food service, but largely invisible. You said that in 1986. Mm-hmm. And you said that to me that night at that dinner, and I wrote it. I couldn't wait to go back to my hotel. I didn't want to look like a young kid running back to my room, writing at the table. But I was like, oh God, let me remember this. I wrote it down, but I want you to talk a little bit about the contributions and that Black chefs have given to the culture of this country, and especially the culinary culture. And particularly, we're featuring 5 chefs this month in week 2. Chef Hercules Posey, Chef Leah Chase, my friend Chef Patrick Clark, Edna Lewis, and then I left you for the last day of that week because I want to make sure that I really talked about you to our, we're taping this and this is going to be a part of our series to the whole company, but I really wanted you to talk about those other chefs and what they meant to the culinary industry, not just Black and African American, but what they meant to American culinary industry. Can you talk a little bit about that with us?
Well, I don't know if you knew it, but I'm the only living one
I know that.
In that group. And I'm fortunate enough to be honored to be in the African American Museum in Washington, D.C., where all of us are recognized. Edna,
Wonderful.
Patrick, Leah, and myself, and of course, Hercules. Well, each one is, in its own right, had made a contribution to food in America. For some years, there was this distinction that one would think you'd have to have in order to be a professional chef. You'd have to have trained in Europe. And some of us in our earliest careers, one you haven't mentioned was James Hemings. Thomas Jefferson took him to France for 5 years, and he trained under the pastry chefs and master chefs of France before he came back to the States to be Jefferson's chef, and then also work with Jefferson until he left. But Hercules was George Washington's chef, and he worked with Washington. I think Washington wanted to take him to the White House, but he refused to go and end up leaving and end up in Philadelphia. Edna was just a phenomenal woman who cooked from her heart. She learned to cook at her mother's table in the kitchen and in a home in Virginia. She learned to cook the things that they grew. If they didn't grow it, they didn't cook it. They didn't go run to the grocery store and buy a bunch of food. They cooked seasonally. So she was kind of the leader or the trendsetter about farm to table long before some of these young fellas even knew what it meant. Patrick, again, having, let me finish with Edna. Edna not only was a home cook, she eventually ended up in New York, and she did some other things in her career. She sewed, and like all the Black women that I knew in the early age, they did a little house cleaning or whatever they could do to make a dollar. And but she cooked, and that's how she got at Cafe Nicholson. The owner of Cafe Nicholson had been eating her food, and eventually he said, "I'm gonna open up a restaurant. I want you to come be the chef." And they weren't called very many male cooks, chef at that time if they were Black. Very less a woman, but they called her Chef Edna back in the 40s when she was at Cafe Nicholson.
Right.
So like 48 to 54 or something like that. So she didn't pay it a lot of attention that, that throwing that label on her didn't mean much. She respected and cared about chefs and cooks, and she cared an awful lot about people of color who worked in the industry. That was her joy. She often talked about the cooks on the railroad and the ships, and she just understood that we had made a great contribution. People sometimes forget who the workforce was in this country.
Absolutely.
So I want to take a quick second and give a little history lesson. Prior to 1977, professional chefs in America were domestics. From 1963 to 1977, the American Culinary Federation fought to get the Department of Labor to reclassify cooks and chefs from domestics to professionals.
Right.
Louis Sachsbury, who was a crazy Hungarian, but he was a knowledgeable person. He had a PhD in clinical psychology. In 1963, he was at an ACF convention in Cleveland, and he addressed the delegation by saying, "Hello, fellow domestics."
Wow.
And the Swiss, the French, the Italians, they wanted to snatch him off the diocese and beat him up. But then he began to explain to them, no matter how much of a professional they were in Europe, once they arrived on American soil, they were just domestics. So at that time, Dr. Miner and General McLaughlin got together, and for 14 years they fought to get the designation changed to professionals, and that didn't occur till 1977. So there were many culinary schools in the United States. Some started in the 40s. The CIA was in New Haven, Connecticut. It started around 1946, primarily to help GIs coming home from the war use their GI Bill. City College in San Francisco had started before that, but as I say, it was tied to City College in San Francisco, but they did have a culinary arts program. LA Trade Tech had a culinary program back in the 30s and 40s. So there were a couple older schools around the country dealing with it, but they were usually tied to some college that a city or a state had. But after 1977, a lot of things started to change in the country. You know, from 77 to 83, we started dealing with the food of America. Prior to 1983, it was just American food was primarily Southern food in the rest of the country. There was no such thing as American regional cuisine. That didn't start till 83. James Beard, Julia Childs, Clay Claiborne, they all met at a conference in New Orleans to help define what American regional cooking was. The 1976-77 Culinary Olympic team won a gold medal with an entire American menu. And so that kind of got it started. And then from there, they started defining this food. So you had Tex-Mex, California cuisine, central part of the country. But Southern cuisine was the original cuisine from appetizer to dessert.
Can you quickly tell us about, you want to quickly tell us about, I know you were heading into, sorry to cut you off, but you were heading into Patrick Clark.
Yes.
And what he meant, because I went to school with Patrick.
Yes.
He graduated the year before me, but I knew Patrick. And the one thing he always said to me, when I first came to FLIK, he said, "Are you sure you want to work for a food service company?" And I remember telling him, I said, "You know what? I got to get some kind of a life. I just got married, and I know the marriage life for most chefs is about a year." So I wanted to stay married. I'm still married to this day, the same woman, lady. But he was definitely a driving force. And believe it or not, he went over to France to cook, and I was supposed to go the year after him. But of course, I thought I was going to be a basketball star.
Well, he went to England. He went to England first.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about Patrick and Leah?
Yeah. Patrick was a unique individual. You got to remember, Patrick's father was a chef. Patrick's father worked at 21 Club
in New York City.
New York. So Patrick was destined to be a chef. Cooking was something he wanted to do. He was baking cheesecakes with his father when he was 6, 7 years old.
That was recipe.
But Patrick loved food. But Patrick, he cooked one thing at home, but the job was something different for Patrick. The job reflected his training, not only what he learned at Brooklyn Tech.
Mm-hmm.
When he went on to England, he apprenticed at a hotel there, and then he went to France and worked with some of the top chefs in France. So when Patrick came back to the States and got involved at Maxon's and a few other restaurants before he went to Cafe Luxembourg in Odeon, he was dealing with basically his French training. And so when he opened up Odeon, it was about him applying his French training to American view of food. And so Patrick was a leader in dealing with new American cuisine. And it was an original, it wasn't something he took something and threw 10 ingredients in the pot and hoped it turned out. He knew from his basic French training and classical training, and then he developed those recipes himself.
I remember the first thing that Patrick said on television at the when he was at the Odeon, Cafe Luxembourg. His main thing was, I just want to make sure that people know that people of color, we don't only cook ribs and collard greens and mac and cheese. We can cook a hell of a lot more than what they say we can cook. And I always took that to heart, because I always said, okay, when I get out there, I want people to know too that that's not all what I cook, and there is a love and the passion that goes into other foods that we cook.
It didn't matter so much what we cooked prior to the 70s and it becoming a profession. Because I worked for Chef Robert W. Lee. He worked at the Harrisburg Hotel from 1939 to 1967. Back in those days, you worked for an owner of an hotel. It wasn't a corporation with 4 or 5 guys in suits running around telling you to jump through loops. Chef Lee was Mr. Johnson's chef, and he ran the hotel. And Chef Lee, we cooked sweetbreads, but we cooked fried chicken too.
Right, right.
The hotel was right on 3rd Street in Harrisburg, right down from the Capitol. We had a dining room called the Senate Caucus Room. So we were feeding all the legislatures. But this hotel was run by an African-American chef with an entire African-American crew.
Wow.
All through the 60s. So it came a point where once they started defining American regional cooking, they also started positioning themselves to be the authority on cooking. And when I say that, all of a sudden they start telling you what you had to do in order to have knowledge. So that started to be the beginning of it. If you didn't work in Europe or hadn't worked in France or somewhere in Europe, you couldn't be a real chef. And so there was some nonsense to that, as I still believe, but that made some chefs think that they had to make everybody know that they had, you meet a guy and say, and he'd be a black chef, first thing he'd say, I worked in Europe, I worked in France. Well, if you really know the story, some of them guys went over there, they did nothing but wash lettuce for 6 months and then come back and say, I worked in Europe.
Right.
You know what? There's something. Can I jump in, Mike, just quickly? There's a funny story about my mother. She came from Macon, Georgia, and she migrated her way to the north to Philadelphia, matter of fact. And I used to ask her, how did you become such a good chef? Not chef, cook. She was a black cook. But she would say, well, because I like to eat, of course, duh, because I like to eat. But it wasn't lost on her that coming from Macon, Georgia, from the south and up to the north, that when she cooked recipes and called me in begrudgingly to the kitchen, that she was trying to teach me, number one, Southern cooking. She was trying to keep that history going, but she was the kind of cook that would go to a restaurant and go, you know what this is? She would pick it apart in her mouth and go, you know what this is? This is a recipe from, and she would tell me kind of the origin of, she really wanted me to, and it was important for me to pass this down as well, to understand that the Southern cooking was being woven into American cuisine and to identify. So she really told me how to recognize it, so much so, even now, it's a running joke with the grandkids. They go, when I go, you know what this is? This is nothing but a little of this and that, because my mother it was important to her that she teach us that this was Black cooking. This is Black cooking, and it's woven into dining and restaurants, and she would go home and replicate it. So I love, Chef Randall, your story of Southern cooking and how it's kind of been imagined elsewhere. But there are Southern cooks like my mother that really benefited from Black chefs like you that got that message out to say, hey, this is what Black chefs have contributed to American cuisine and American culture, and why it's so important as part of Black history. So I wanted to.
That was one of my interests when I started the Taste the Heritage Foundation, was to make sure that people understood the contribution that African Americans made to food in America. Patrick was on the cover of Restaurant Business Magazine in 1988. And I was in Hawaii around 1990, and I ran into the publisher. And I said, man, why you don't ever do any stories about Black chefs? He said, we only do stories about people who are doing something. If you were in the restaurant doing your job every day, that was just you doing your job. That wasn't doing nothing. You had to be doing something spectacular, or they want to write about you. So I started, getting a group of chefs together. I got Edna, Patrick, Leah Chase, Earlis Bell, Penny Gordon, and we started doing Taste of Heritage dinners around the country. We did one in Beverly Hills at the L'Hermitage Hotel. When Patrick left California and came back to DC, we did the second one at the Hay Adams. Patrick hosted one at the Hay Adams, and then we did some in New York. Did 2 or 3 in Washington, D.C. at the Hyatt, not the Hyatt Regency, the Grand Hyatt.
Okay.
And I did one at the JW Marriott, but that was all about trying to get some newsprint, some photographs of Black chefs cooking dinners at the level that they were trying to say we didn't cook at. But that was a twofer. One, a lot of Black chefs thought that they had to abandon their heritage in order to be a professional. In other words, you say, man, you're a chef, yeah. So, oh, man, I don't cook in no collard greens and fried chicken. I'm classically trained. They were run from their heritage. And it just didn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm sorry.
That's why I love Chef Randall, why you do that. That's why I love my mom's story, because she was trying to do it one person at a time, or two. I'm one of two, but 2 people at a time to say, no, we're not running from our heritage. I want you to know this is where this comes from, even up in the North. So it's a great work that we've been doing to make sure it stays.
I remember we did a dinner at the L'Hermitage. I asked Patrick, I said, Patrick, he's going to do the fish course. I said, Patrick, do some catfish. He looked at me. Oh, man, I don't know catfish. So he did a halibut. I never forget it, with braised greens, with a broiled halibut with a mushroom crust. It was a wonderful dish. But he just had to do what he felt like reflect him. But a year or 2 later, I came back to New York. I went to the tavern on the Green. I walked in the kitchen. I said, what's that, Patrick? He said, oh, that's catfish. We got on our menu tonight. So, you go full circle sometimes. You come back home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I want to hear a little bit more about Leah Chase and her influence on not just culinary traditions, but on culture, specifically in New Orleans.
Leah was just special all by herself. You all understand, Leah was a waitress before she became a chef. Leah graduated from high school and worked as a waitress in the French Quarter. And then she met Dookie. Leah was a very attractive woman. So she caught Dookie's eye when he was 16. But he had his own band at 16. And he said she was out dancing one night, and he said, y'all keep playing. I'm going to dance with that pretty lady. And he danced his way into being married to her. And they had 4 kids by the time they was 20. She was about 3 years older than him. But his mother and father had a sandwich shop because, you know, those of you who don't know, they kind of book numbers out of the shop, policy numbers, Bolita. And so they would sell sandwiches and a few numbers. And eventually they start selling a little beer. And they borrowed $600 and started Dookie Chases in 1946, I guess it was. They had the sandwich shop around 41. But when Leah got involved, her and the mother-in-law clashed. Not so much about the food, but like Leah wanted the place that they were establishing to look like the French Quarter. Have white tablecloths and napkins and silverware and that kind of stuff. So she worked and wrestled until she got her way, and then got nice chairs and tables. And I've met people all over the country who've told me back in the 40s and 50s, this is when segregation didn't allow Black folk to go to restaurants anywhere else in New Orleans. If you went to a prom dinner, a Little League baseball banquet, took your girlfriend out to dinner, you went to Dookie Chases because there wasn't no place else to go. And then the men had to be careful because if you took one woman out one night and went to Dookie Chases, if they came back too soon with another woman, the waitress might remember. So that's what Rudy Lombard told me. All y'all know Rudy was the one that wrote Creole Feast, 15 Master Chefs Reveal His Secret. But Rudy was a special cat too. But Leah just was a special woman. And during those years, with segregation going on, there was no place for Black and white folk to meet as far as the politics were concerned. So the white politicians would come to Leah's and they would have meetings upstairs on the second floor. And everybody told me, said, the cops might be outside, but they never came in. And as long as you were inside, you were safe. And everybody came inside, they hashed out, they planned all kind of strategies. And, you know, Leah's famous saying, she could kind of fix all kind of things with a bowl of gumbo.
Wow.
Well, I met Leah through Creole Feast, through that book, and called her and introduced myself. And then we just stayed close. I was the opening chef instructor at Cal Poly Pomona University when we opened the Collins Center. And the president of the university had been to New Orleans and had eaten at Dookie Chases. And he had an African-American vice president, Mr. James Bell, Dr. James Bell. So when I got to Dr. Bell told me, you know, that one day we'd like to see about having Leah come to the university. So I was on the phone saying, Leah, I want you to come. We're going to do a dinner. And she came and flew into Pomona and did a lecture demonstration in the theater. And then my students fixed a lunch for her with the president and some other dignitaries. And then we did a dinner for about 200 people that night, a Creole feast. So she was just a wonderful person and special to me because whenever I asked her to come and do something, she was on the plane and there. She did dinners with me in Chicago, in Washington, D.C. She came down here to Jacksonville. We taped a television show back in the early 2000s for HGTV. But whenever I asked her, so she just never refused to help. And that's just on the food side. She was just as genuine when it came to art. In the beginning, she admitted she didn't know a lot about art. She just knew what she liked. And she liked to support Black artists. But eventually she got on the board of the New Orleans Art Commission, I guess it is. But, and so she was just always busy trying to help promote Black artists and turn the restaurant into a living gallery. When you walked in, you just saw Black artists' contributions all over the place. And she was that. Go ahead.
No, I was saying, I think I know I've been to the restaurant at least 2 times because I had a really close friend who was her her niece, her grandniece, but her niece. And I think with all of this, and this is why this is really important for me, and not just sharing, because what you're giving us today is history, but and it's wonderful. And the biggest part for me, I think I alluded to it earlier, was we're going to share this podcast, and we're nowhere near finished, but we're going to share this podcast with us. You know, people say, "Oh, we're going to share with the customers." And I said, "No, the most important part is we're going to share with our associates and our employees, because to me, this is Black pride, and to me, this is what takes us when we, you know, our people, we're loyal people, and our people, when they go to work every day, so I want to make sure that they get this extra bit of Black pride. And I'm going to make sure that this just really goes out through the company."
Yeah, it's good, because so often I hear from young Black chefs today. I worked in kitchen, wasn't nobody in the kitchen Black but me. And sometimes they think they're the only one that ever did anything in the kitchen.
Right.
But they don't understand that they standing on the shoulders of folks did a lot of sweating before they got there.
Absolutely. Hey, Erica, do you want to, before we move on to the next chapter, and I know Julie and team is running a little bit, but I'm
enjoying this so much.
Erica, let's really quickly talk about Black History Month and what it means to us. And then also, I know there was in the connection, Chef Joe, it's not about food for me when it comes about Black History Month, but I do want to kind of talk about why it's important and why food plays a big part in the Black community and Black history. But it's not Black History Month. It's not about Black History Month. But Erica, I know you had a couple of questions about the history and why it's in February.
Yes, yep, you took the words right out of my mouth, Michael. So yeah, just Chef Joe, just was wondering your insights on why Black History Month is in February. Maybe any insights into how do we connect Black History Month with food? Just your insights on those things.
Well, my experience has been this. It's a kind of a twofer. It started out, as you all know, it was like a Black History Week that evolved into a month.
Yeah.
And the shortest month in the year is February, so it was something folks could get over with quickly, and they didn't be bothered with it no more till next year. That's my own personal opinion.
And the coldest month.
Yeah.
The coldest.
But food is relevant because, you know, we don't as much as we used to, but we came together around food. You know, we sat at the table, we got to know each other around food. Two strangers can sit down at the same table and be best friends for the rest of their life when they get up, sharing an interest in food. I've got a doctor here. I've been eating breakfast with him for 20 years since I've been in Savannah. But we talk politics, we talk everything, but the key reason we meet is to have breakfast together. Now with this pandemic, I don't go to restaurants and run out anymore, so he'll call me and say, "Man, I miss you. I'm gonna drive by and just look out the window and wave at you." I said, "Come on, but you can't come in." But we enjoyed talking, so we do call each other and talk. And with all this nonsense on the TV today, you're sure we can find something to have an opinion about.
Yeah.
But food is just a good common denominator. And unfortunately, young people got so involved. I have 3 children and I have one son. He went through a fast food phase for about 10 years. You know, Burger King and McDonald's, that's all he needed. He was on the go. And finally, I got him now he's baking cakes, cooking steaks, and broiling pork chops. And he done figured out cooking food is a bit better than it was. He make his own hamburger better than the one he get from McDonald's. I said, "I told you." Well, he finally understands. But it took a long time, you know. They just in too much of a hurry to take the time to do anything. He thinks cooking is put it in the oven, set a timer, and go do something else. And he's cool as long as it turns out all right. But he, like most young people, if it don't work out right, they don't want to do it no more. I ain't never cooking that no more. You don't need it. Something wrong with the recipe. So, but food is a good opportunity to bring people together, to give us something to talk about that we can agree on. You know, you say, Villa Sabuco. Well, somebody somewhere has had some Italian food and they know what that is,
Right.
and they want to talk about it. You know, or you can say a good pot of chitlins, and then somebody go to squeezing their nose and talking about, I couldn't stand that. We don't like that smell. But you still got something to talk about.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. With or without hog balls, exactly.
Well, I like hog balls in my chitlins.
I'm a hog ball lady too. I gotta tell you.
Hey, Chef, I was telling everyone about, we went down 2 summers ago with some friends of ours, my wife and I, and 4 other couples. And we, of course, you know, we ended up in your place, and we had, it was Sunday, and we had the best gospel brunch in Savannah. And,
Yeah,
I was telling the team about that today, but I want you to quickly tell us a little bit about just your restaurant and your menus and what's happening, what's going on.
What I did, I had a young friend here. He's about 30, maybe 25 years younger than I am, but he bought a building, and unbeknownst to me, his wife called me once, because I've had a cooking school here for 17 years, those of you don't know. It was a recreational cooking school where we just had a U-shaped table and a full kitchen, and we did dinners to the chef's table and fixed a 4-course meal in front of people. And I did that for 17 years. And it was my way of talking people into understanding what the food was, because they were at my table. It was a good way for me to cook what I wanted and sharing things, and a lot of it came out of my cookbook. So when Terrell called me to come and help him, or asked me to meet him, when I got there, the place was ready. He just didn't know what to do. So I put a contract together as a consultant to help him open it. And then before we could get open, we had become partners. And I developed, you know, originally I was going to give him some recipes and walk. And in the end, I committed my food to him and the restaurant. And once my food was there, I was committed to be there to make sure it was right.
Absolutely.
And so that's how it became. And it just, the food that I cooked at the cooking school for 17 years, dishes that I cooked all over the country. You know, in the 70s, I was in Buffalo at the Coaster, and we used to go 50 gallons of French onion soup a week. And so quite naturally, I had classic French onion soup on the menu. I'm old, so a lot of old stuff people couldn't find on the menu no more, it was on my menu. You know, oysters Rockefeller, clams Casino, just dishes that I trained on. So that was just part of my cooking. And that's what we did. And it was received well. And we're closed now. We'll get open up when this pandemic gets settled down. And we also are a jazz club. And I just wanted to mention that. So we have live jazz every night too. And it just doesn't make sense to pay a band to sit there and play for themselves.
Right, right.
So we want people to come out to enjoy the music and the food.